was recently appointed to the President's Export Council, where she helps farmers and manufacturers to export their products overseas. Please give a warm welcome to U.S. Senator Debbie Stabenow.
Well, good morning. It's wonderful to be here, and thank you, Roger, very much. And I want to congratulate the Farm Journal for hosting what is a very important day. You've already heard from many friends of mine, starting the day with Senator Roberts, who is my Republican counterpart in the Senate. We pride ourselves in agriculture and working in a bipartisan way. We may fight over the North and the South and the East and the West and commodities, but we tend to operate in a very bipartisan way, and so I'm pleased that you heard from him this morning. You know, when I came in as chair of the Agriculture Committee, a lot of people who didn't know Michigan said to me, what is somebody from a car state doing chairing the Ag Committee? And it's true, we build a lot of automobiles as well as farm tractors and trucks and so on, but 1 out of 4 jobs in Michigan is in agriculture. It's a big deal for us. And whether it's processing or whether it's agribusiness or whether it's having more diversity of crops than any other state but California, I'm very proud of Michigan agriculture and to be in a spot now to be able to lead us as we go forward through some very interesting and challenging times, that's for sure. It has been an incredible year to date, and let me talk a little bit about going forward now. We started the year assuming regular order and putting together the Farm Bill and have done a number of specific hearings, 12 hearings altogether, but 7 on the Farm Bill issues, 2 field hearings, both at my alma mater, Michigan State University, who should have won the game against Wisconsin. I just want to make that clear. We should have won that game. And then we went to Kansas, where the major champion for Kansas State, Pat Roberts, hosted me, and I wore purple on his behalf for that particular field hearing. But it was a wonderful opportunity to be in Kansas and, frankly, to see a very different terrain. And we are blessed with a lot of water in Michigan. And going to Kansas, saw something very, very different. And it reinforced for me the challenges of agriculture across the country, and working with Chairman Lucas and talking about what has happened in his state, as well as going down to Texas with our cotton folks to look at what's happening there. We've had some major, major challenges around the country, as we all know. But let me talk about, since we began our journey of putting together the process of the Farm Bill, something happened along the way, which was a deficit reduction act and coming together around the Budget Control Act that raised the debt ceiling. But as you know, it also put in place the expectation that a special committee, which we dubbed the Super Committee, would come up with at least $1.2 trillion in deficit reduction. So I reached out to Chairman Lucas and to Senator Roberts and to Congressman Peterson and said, rather than having others decide what should happen related to agriculture policy, we ought to be doing this ourselves. And they agreed with that. We know that we have a huge deficit hole, and frankly, agriculture has been doing more than our share. We took cuts already in crop insurance that went towards the deficit. We were one of the highest levels in the current budget, ongoing budget this year in cuts. And ag research took a tremendous cut, which I'm very concerned about. So agriculture has done its part, but here's what we knew was the backdrop of the discussion that we entered into in September and October. Congressman Paul Ryan's deficit reduction proposal called for $30 billion in cuts to commodities and crop insurance, $18 billion to conservation, and another $127 billion in cuts to nutrition. That passed the House as part of the House Republican budget, and unfortunately almost every Senate Republican had voted for that. So that was one mark. Then we had Vice President Biden and Congressman Eric Cantor and others, just proposals that were looking at the range of $33 billion in cuts to commodities and up to 20 possibly in nutrition. We don't know, but we would certainly know about the 33 number. President Obama's budget proposal came forward again with $33 billion in cuts in agriculture. And so that was out there for us as a backdrop. These cuts, in our judgment, would be devastating to agriculture. And so when we were asked to come together and develop recommendations, we decided to take it very seriously. And we did come up with fair, responsible cuts to reduce the deficit, but within agricultural policies that make sense. And our basic message has been all along, we're willing to work with you on recommending cuts that offset the deficit reduction. But we want to write the policy. We don't want people that are outside of agriculture writing the policy. And in the end, as you know, we were, in fact, the only committee that came up with a comprehensive, bipartisan, bicameral set of recommendations. And I'm very proud of that because we met the challenge. The bar was high. It was very difficult for us, but we, in the end, looked at the fact that the spending under the agriculture committees is slightly less than 2% of federal outlays. And the $23 billion that we proposed was slightly less than 2% of what was being required of the cuts in terms of $1.2 trillion. So we felt we did our fair share, and we were willing to do our fair share. In that process, we rigorously reviewed over 5,000 public comments we'd received from farmers and ranchers and others. Reached out to commodity groups, conservation groups, those involved with specialty crops, those involved in nutrition, to get as much guidance and input as possible in the very short time frame that we had. And even though at this point the super committee did not achieve its overall goal, we achieved a tremendous amount of good work. Now, there's more to be done. But we came together and developed some very positive relationships. I didn't know Chairman Lucas really very well before this process and have gained tremendous respect for him and his staff. And we really have a terrific working relationship now and working with our ranking members and so on. We came up with a number of areas that are a foundation now for moving forward to the next round of hearings and markup as it relates to a farm bill. And now in creating our recommendations, we looked at a number of things that I had been speaking about since the very first, very first speech I made at the beginning of the year after taking over as chair of the Ag Committee, and that is that we should look at principles, not programs. What are the goals we're trying to achieve at a time when we know that deficit reduction is a very serious issue for us? What are the goals? What are the principles? Not what are the individual programs, but how do we do things in the right way where we are achieving what agriculture needs to achieve, providing the tools for farmers and ranchers, but doing it in a way that limits duplication, cuts back on paperwork, and really refocuses so that we're streamlining and using the dollars that we have more effectively. We all know that farmers and ranchers face unique risks, unlike other professions, whether it be weather or market conditions outside of a farmer's control, and that those conditions can cause devastating effects. We saw this certainly in the historic droughts in the Southwest this past summer, as well as flooding, as well as other conditions around the globe and the impact they've had on our growers. That's why we decided to make risk management our number one principle. And we heard over and over again, whether we were in Michigan, in Kansas, talking with commodity groups, doing hearings in the Capitol, that crop insurance was the number one area that people wanted to keep and remain strong and strengthened as a risk management tool. And frankly, that's exactly what we did. That's exactly what we did. So we made this a cornerstone of risk management in our proposal. We also knew that there was not the support to continue direct payments, and that we needed to move to a system that was based on loss and risk rather than an automatic payment regardless of conditions. And so we started from there and moved to design something that would be more risk-based. Now, we've made a lot of progress, I think, from the 2008 Farm Bill on risk management, and there's more work to be done in that area. We've gotten good feedback, and we've got to focus on providing something that's simple and equitable and responsible, but we also know that different regions of the country have different challenges. Crop insurance works better for some commodities than others, and so that has been part of the challenge as we have looked at the commodity title. And we will continue to work on proposals that will work for all commodities. We also looked at conservation, and over the years we've had great ideas in conservation, and every time there was a great new idea, we created a great new program. We have 23 different conservation programs. Some are duplicative, and we have extra paperwork and things that could be done to streamline conservation. And we took a hard look and did what everybody talks about but rarely does, which is to streamline conservation from 23 to 13 different programs, putting them into 5 different buckets with more flexibility to be able to do what we all know is important. Conservation is really one of the most important parts of farm policy, I believe. It ensures we have a safe and abundant food supply, clean water, thriving wildlife populations. It's a critical, again, risk management tool for our growers, and I'm very pleased with the work that we have done in the area of conservation. We basically, as I mentioned, conservation water quality habitat in a specific area or and producers would be encouraged to leverage other partnerships to achieve common goals. The third area would be easements, an easements toolbox, which would be a consolidated easements program with 2 legs: agricultural land easements to protect land from development and keep them devoted to agricultural use, and a wetlands easement program to restore and protect and enhance our wetlands. The fourth toolbox would be conservation reserve program, and we all know how important that is. For 25 years, it's removed highly erodible land from production to benefit our soil and water quality as well as wildlife habitat. We continue this as well as the transition incentives program to help retiring farmers and ranchers to transfer land to beginning farmers and ranchers. This is another priority of mine and others, and I know of Secretary Vilsack, to focus on the next generation of farmers and ranchers. And the last toolbox includes the conservation of private grazing land, grassroots soil, source water protection, small watershed rehabilitation, and the voluntary public access program. So basically 5 areas, more flexibility within there. We've seen in the past, as I mentioned before, that anytime somebody has a good idea, we add a new program. Everybody always talks about streamlining, but it's very tough to do. We've taken that very seriously, and how we could do that. Save money. This actually saves money, cuts down on paperwork, but maintains all of the important areas on conservation. We also recognize the importance and the diversity of American agriculture, and I have, as you know, many specialty crops in Michigan. We're proud to be #1 in a number of fruits and vegetables, second only to California. In fact, 50% of the value of all agriculture produced in the country comes from fruits and vegetables, and up until recently, that has not been a permanent part of the Farm Bill, and I was pleased to author a title focusing on specialty crops last time. So we maintain that as well and do some streamlining, but make sure that that on that area of specialty crops and organics continues to be a part of the Farm Bill. So our recommendations to the Super Committee really represented a very accelerated timetable, but the breadth and diversity of agriculture and important reforms that we have all talked about. I should also mention that we took seriously reforms on fraud and abuse in nutrition programs. I come from a state heavily hit on the economy, as you know, in Michigan. And frankly, I have no tolerance for someone receiving food assistance that shouldn't be receiving it. I want every dollar going to that person who's worked hard all their life. I've got an awful lot of folks in Michigan paid taxes all their life. They are mortified that they would have to worry about putting food on the table for their family at this point in their life, but they need to, and that's what the food assistance is supposed to be there for. And so we've gone through and dealt with what we view as loopholes in some areas to beef up enforcement that need to occur as well. So how do we move forward? Well, we are moving forward using the ideas and the good work and the relationships that have been built from this process on the Super Committee to take the next step, both in the House and the Senate, putting together the final workings for the Farm Bill and reporting out a bill and hopefully getting this passed. That's what we need to get done this year. Our farmers, ranchers need predictability like every other part of the economy. And my hope was and is that we could do something as soon as possible to give them that predictability. We have other responsibilities, though, before the committee, as you know. And so let me just mention the one other area that's front and center right now before the committee. And that is what has happened through the CFTC and MF Global. And we, as you know, oversee Title VII, the derivatives title of the Financial Services Reform law. And we've been doing oversight hearings on how we implement that, how do we make sure that legitimate end users are able to use our financial markets to hedge risk, create capital, that we are not interfering with necessary parts of the financial market while creating transparency and accountability where it's certainly needed in the swaps market. But now have a situation in the futures market with MF Global where they were a major player in the futures market and their customers relied on the markets like they always do to hedge their risk. And the last hours before their bankruptcy, they reported $900 million in customer money that was missing. And now we don't know. We've heard numbers anywhere from $600 million to $1.2 billion in customer money that is unaccounted for. And this is absolutely unacceptable. So my top priority is to focus on customers, farmers, ranchers, co-ops, grain elevators, others who need their money back and need to have confidence in the system going forward. This was the 8th largest bankruptcy in U.S. history, and we on the Agriculture Committee take our responsibilities on behalf of American taxpayers and customers very, very seriously. We have done one hearing, as you know, last week, bringing in the regulators, the chairman of the CFTC and the SEC, and looking overall, how could this happen from a regulatory standpoint, what needs to be in place, what was done and not done. On December 13th, we will proceed with a specific hearing on MF Global, and we will be bringing in executives from the company as well as customers, and frankly, the story through which, the lens through which I want to talk about this is through the people who put their confidence and faith in this company, in these markets, and now find themselves in an extremely difficult situation, which should not have occurred. And so we will hear first from those who are the victims of this situation, and then the companies, and then the regulators as well. So we have a number of people coming in, and we're going to take this wherever it goes in terms of our role and what we need to do. I'm extremely concerned that the collapse of MF Global has shaken confidence, has scared many people away from the futures markets, but we all know that our farmers, ranchers, co-ops, everyone who uses these markets need to be able to hedge their risk and have confidence in the market. So that is the lens through which I am focused. We will make sure that we are focused on where the money has gone, when people are going to be fully made whole, if they are going to be, which they should be, and then what is it that we need to be doing from an oversight standpoint to make sure that there is, in fact, confidence in the futures markets going forward. What needs to happen and who is responsible for what happened. So looking back on this last year, it's been a busy year. We have important responsibilities on oversight. We have important responsibilities on the agricultural policy and food nutrition and conservation policy of our country. And we have an important job to do in completing our 5-year policy, which we always dub as the Farm Bill. I'm committed to doing everything I can to make sure that we have the right policy for jobs. 16 million people in America work for American agriculture. It's a big deal. It's an incredibly important part of our economy. It's the one area where we actually have a trade surplus. And it's an area of tremendous opportunity and growth for us going forward. So I do take that very seriously and look forward to continuing to work with all of you and with my colleagues in the House and the Senate to make sure that we are responsible in our oversight duties as it relates to financial markets and what needs to be done for confidence in the system, but also that the American public has confidence that we can actually come together and get something done. Because that confidence has been shaken in Washington as well. And I'm going to continue to do everything within my power to reach out across the aisle with my colleagues to get things done that make sense for our families.
Relative to the farm, since you went through this, it didn't come through
the we basically, there was around conservation. There's no conservation developed there. And so I would see us basically doing hearings where we would flesh out those ideas and go from there. The challenge is always the commodity title as we make payment reform and move from base acres to planted acres, which is an important reform that people, I think the public is asking us to do. It then means risk management programs affect different crops differently. The reality is when you're looking at rice and peanuts, the crop insurance program, it doesn't work the same for them. Cotton, different. So that's the biggest challenge for us, is moving forward to, as you know, we've developed what I think there's a general consensus around a shallow loss program, a revenue program above crop insurance being the mainstay, but then adding something to mitigate loss on top of that. But then the question becomes, what about other areas where it doesn't work? How do we then address that? And so we'll continue to flush that out. We made a lot of good progress, but I think there's differences between the House and the Senate. There's differences among different commodity groups. So, but we do want to start not from zero in the sense of ignoring what we've already done. I mean, what we've done is flush out, I think, the areas where the tough questions are. And we may not have the answers, but we have really been able to expedite the process of the next Farm Bill by flushing out the areas where we know we really need to work. And so that's what we'll do. And because of the fact that we have been able to develop some very positive working relationships and respect for each other, I think we've been able, again, to expedite this process going forward.
There's something you mentioned that I think is a primary concern to us in terms of food security long term that often is not discussed in a forum like this, but you'll understand it well in the state that you come from, is immigration. And I guess I have two questions. One is, how do we raise the profile and importance of this issue second, because it's so fragmented and you have very specific groups that are interested in it,
Right.
how do we overcome that fragmentation? And I'm asking because I think that if agriculture together, much more unified, took on this issue, people might be able to see it differently, they might understand it differently, and I think it's a much bigger issue related to agriculture that usually gets discussed.
I agree. This is a very big issue. I hear about it a lot in Michigan. It is important if all of agriculture could come together, but everybody is affected differently. And if you're out picking apples or blueberries or asparagus, and it's different, much more intense, much more real if you're leaving the crop in the field, which is what has happened. So, but I do think it's very important that agriculture come together around this. There's really two pieces that make it challenging. One, agriculture speaking with one voice, but then secondly, the broader question around comprehensive reform. And is this done separately, just with agriculture, as Senator Feinstein's ag jobs bill would be, and so on, or is it part of comprehensive reform? And there's a huge debate about that. There are many people who don't want to see one area addressed unless everything's addressed, which I think that makes it much more complicated to get done. But the reality is this: we need an immigration system that works, where people are here legally, they're able to work. We have the accountability in the system, but we also have the workers that are needed. And so I think first it's getting all of agriculture to understand how important this is to try to come together.
You have another question? Please introduce yourself.
Hi. Okay.
First of all, I really appreciate your efforts and your vision on the global issue and your agendas. I just want to clarify one thing. In most situations, the account holder, essentially the account holder, did not choose as a global. They set up the account initiating brokers. So then the initiating broker gave global access as the XDO. We put our faith in the system and in the marketplace.
Right.
And that global, through the position of XDM, took the opportunities to steal that account. They had access to the account as an opportunity to create revenue to solve transactions the positions in place. But in that opportunity, they misplaced the trust and stole out of the account. And I guess that's the difference.
Correct. Segregated customer funds can be used for U.S. government debt or sovereign debt. Sovereign debt is now excluded from that. So that's a step. That's a piece of it. But I wish that had been done much sooner. But that certainly was a piece of it. This is very complicated, as you know, on multiple levels. There are many people appropriately doing investigations on a lot of different levels. But as I mentioned before, our focus is, one, on making sure from a customer standpoint that the customer is protected and what needs to happen in order for the customer to be protected. Are there rules changes? Are there legal changes from the law standpoint? Is it just a matter of oversight? We've also given a tremendous new workload to the CFTC without the resources. Do we have enough cops on the beat? I would argue no. We don't. We don't have enough investigators that are watching every one of those 126, FCM. So we have, I think, some serious work to do on our end, as well as the investigations that are going on in other places.
Just one part of your comment. As massive holders have assets stolen from the entire company.
Right.
MF Global has $51 billion of assets, with $41 billion of liabilities. Every one of those asset values should first go make all the theft, the asset holders of the theft. That's your vision as well.
Absolutely. Well, you raise also met with the trustee that has been it's now overseeing the bankruptcy from the customer standpoint. And on the security side, which is only about 400 accounts as opposed to 38,000 accounts on the future side. But there is an insurance system, as you know, security system, SIPC. There's nothing like that on the commodity side. So one question is, now that we have seen multiple fold increases in activity on the commodity side over the last 10 years, should there be, and that's one question that we have, and I welcome your thoughts or anyone else's thoughts, should there be some kind of an insurance system like we have for the FDIC, like we have for securities under what's called SIPC? Should there be something on the future side? And that will be one of the questions that we'll be looking at.
I think the system is set up pretty good because the segregated account for the asset from the family as a security bonds.
Right.
So the asset can be stolen. We appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Senator Stabenow.
Thank you.